It started with a silence that spoke louder than thunder. Before dawn broke over Ouagadougou, encrypted messages traveled quietly through the air. ECOWAS had crossed the line. Diplomacy was over. This wasn't about sanctions or statements anymore. It was war, a direct strike at the heart of the Sahel Alliance, but what they hadn't foreseen was that Captain Ibrahim Traoré already knew. For weeks, whispers had drifted through the ranks, intelligence reports about secret conferences in Abuja, shipments of drones heading south, and the invisible hand guiding it all. A hand not born of Africa. That morning, before the first light touched the red dust of the capital, Traoré stood before his generals and said calmly, "If they raise arms against one of us, they will answer to us all." This was not a fight over territory. It was not about borders drawn on paper. It was about Africa's soul, who truly owned her future. You believe that Africa's destiny belongs to its people, not its rulers. Stay with us till the end. The announcement from Abuja landed like lightning. Under mounting Western pressure, ECOWAS had placed the military option squarely on the table. A statement released at midnight accused Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger of unconstitutional regimes. It demanded an immediate return to civilian rule or face activation of a regional strike force. The message was not a negotiation. It was an ultimatum. But in the streets of Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey, the people didn't chant for war. They shouted one word that shook the air: freedom. Amid the dust, the chants, and the anger, something was awakening, something that could no longer be silenced. At the center of it all, Ibrahim Traoré stood ready for the battle that would decide Africa's path. Across the endless golden plains of the Sahel, the morning wind carried the scent of dust and defiance. Loudspeakers echoed through the villages. "The homeland is threatened. Rise up!" News of ECOWAS' ultimatum swept across the markets, the schools, the army barracks. People asked, "Has war really begun?" And beneath the fear, there was pride, a pride that no empire could measure or understand. Because to the people of the Sahel, the old Africa, the one bound by foreign dictates and fake promises, was gone. A new Africa was being born, from Bamako to Niamey, from the dry farmlands of Kaya to the borders of Dori. The people were no longer afraid. They had endured decades of humiliation dressed up as aid. They had survived under systems that preached democracy but delivered dependence. They remembered every promise made from Paris and Brussels that prosperity would come with their loans. But prosperity never came, only debt, only despair. Then in 2022, a young captain rose from the ranks. The West called him a rebel. The people called him Armin, the protector. Ibrahim Traoré didn't speak the language of polished diplomats. He spoke the words farmers understood, words of survival. "If someone's choking you," he once said, "you can't negotiate to breathe. You tear away the hand that strangles you." When ECOWAS gave its ultimatum, many thought Traoré would yield. Western commentators mocked him. A small country, they said. No air force, no navy, daring to defy an entire region. But they misunderstood him completely. He was not fighting to conquer. He was fighting to stand. Soon, embassies began closing. Aid programs were suspended. Capital fled. Some within the elite pleaded for compromise. "Save the economy," they said, but Traoré's response became immortal. "If sovereignty costs hunger, then we will learn to live with hunger. But at least we will eat with our own hands." It wasn't a slogan. It was an oath, as ECOWAS leaders debated in air-conditioned halls. Traoré met quietly with Mali's Assimi Goïta and Niger's Abdourahmane Tiani. 3 young men, 3 so-called military rulers, signed what would soon change the balance of power in West Africa forever, the Sahel Alliance, or AES. It was more than a military pact. It was a declaration of rebirth. At the signing, Traoré spoke softly but firmly. "We did not leave ECOWAS out of hate. We left because we cannot build a home on a foundation that is not ours." From that moment, the map of West Africa began to shift. For the first time in decades, nations once dismissed as poverty zones started writing their own rules. The AES planned a common defense strategy, a joint currency system, and cross-border infrastructure, all without permission from their former patrons. On local radio, one farmer joked, "We no longer need a license from Paris to dream." But the laughter didn't reach Western ears well, because in Paris, Washington, and Brussels, alarms were going off. France, still nursing its colonial scars, saw the AES as a direct challenge to its dominance. The United States feared Moscow's shadow spreading deeper into the continent, and ECOWAS, once a bridge between Africa and the West, had turned into a gatekeeper for outside powers. Leaked reports revealed secret phone calls between Abuja, Paris, and Brussels. One ECOWAS memo stated plainly, if the AES is not stopped, the entire structure of Western influence in West Africa will collapse. And from that day, war was no longer an unthinkable threat. It became an active option. In Ouagadougou, the city changed overnight. The volunteers filled the main square. Blacksmiths hammered through the night, forging blades. Women brought food to soldiers, and children painted AES flags across their school walls. No one ordered them to do it. They did it because, for the first time, they believed the fight was truly theirs. A French journalist asked a local man in Kaya, "Why are you willing to die for Traoré?" He smiled and said, "We are not dying for him. We are dying so our children won't have to bow like we did." That single answer spread faster than any bullet. Late at night, inside a dimly lit room scattered with maps, Traoré sat in silence. No champagne, no generals in gold, only a notebook filled with his handwriting. No generation can be free if the one before it is afraid. He knew the cost, isolation, sanctions, even assassination, but he also knew something the world had forgotten. True power doesn't come from conferences. It comes from the faith of a people. When asked if he feared war, he simply replied, "I don't fear war. I fear that my son might grow up in a peace built on lies." From Burkina Faso, the spark spread, to Niger, to Mali, then to Chad and Guinea. Posters of Traoré appeared on the walls of schools and homes. In Dakar, students shouted in the streets, "From the Sahel to the Atlantic, one Africa, one voice." On social media, the hashtag #WeAreSahel transcended language and border. This was no longer politics. It was resurrection. The people weren't fighting for territory. They were fighting for the right to exist free. The silence didn't last long. As the alliance gained momentum, ECOWAS tightened the noose. Air routes were blocked, borders sealed. Trade froze overnight. The regional bloc announced that all options remain on the table, including the use of force. Inside meeting rooms in Abuja, generals whispered of an operation backed by NATO technicians and Western advisors. One anonymous official later admitted, "If the Sahel Alliance survives, the message will be dangerous, that no one must remain a colony." But in the Sahel, no one was turning back. Militias assembled near the frontiers, armed with little more than rusted rifles and unbroken will. Old guns, new hearts. When Traoré appeared on national television, his words carried across the desert like thunder. "They call us small, but they forget. The pyramids were built from grains of sand. They call us poor. Yet our gold, our uranium, and our blood have enriched their world." The streets erupted with chants. AES, AES. But somewhere beyond those cheers, unseen hands moved in the dark. Foreign media began calling the coming invasion a stabilization mission. At that same hour, on Niger's southern border, armored convoys started to roll. The world waited for a quick collapse. Analysts predicted the Sahel would fold in days, but then nothing went according to plan. Under the black sky of the desert, the armies of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger stood as one, a single wall of determination. They were not fighting for land. They were fighting for dignity, for the right to breathe without permission. In a dimly lit command bunker, Traoré studied an electronic map. Red dots marked ECOWAS troops advancing toward his borders. Then, one by one, green dots appeared. Volunteer militias, ordinary villagers, elders praying, students sending supplies. The whole nation was becoming its own shield. "They think they can buy victory with drones," Traoré said quietly. "But what they never understood, my people have stopped fearing death. And when a people stop fearing death, no empire can enslave them. An older general spoke softly. "You are wagering everything, Captain." "If we lose," Traoré interrupted without lifting his eyes. "If we lose, all of us lose. But if we win, Africa wakes up. In the Kaya region, farmers dropped their tools and took up weapons, hunting rifles, clubs, whatever they could find. They didn't know military tactics, but they knew the truth of their struggle. A 60-year-old mother told her son as she hid him behind a hut, "Go, my child. Don't shoot just to live. Shoot so you may live free." Those words became the oath of the Sahel. Within 3 days, 14 local militias formed. They had no uniforms, no formal training, only faith. Behind the lines, women rose up as well. They wove flags, cooked, carried messages across fields. Ancient songs, long forgotten, echoed once again through the night. The same songs sung by their ancestors who once resisted chains. In Bamako, young men filled the squares shouting, "Freedom is not requested, it's taken." Traoré understood that modern war isn't won by firepower, but by faith. He and his allies launched Operation Terrassa, Sacred Land. It wasn't an offensive of destruction, it was a call to consciousness. Local radio stations began transmitting messages in 12 languages, not of hate, but of unity, of dignity, of sovereignty. Short clips from Niger flooded social media, children holding AES flags, chanting the names of Traoré, Goïta, and Tiani. None of them were paid. They simply believed history was knocking. In Brussels, ECOWAS officials panicked. A classified report stated, "The enemy lacks a centralized command, yet their coordination exceeds expectations. Every strike is anticipated. The population stands entirely with them." A Western general sighed. "This is no longer a military conflict. It's a war for hearts." Suddenly, international headlines changed tone. The same outlets that had mocked Traoré now called him the man who united the Sahel. But the puppeteers behind the curtain didn't stop. New accusations appeared overnight. Human rights violations, suppression of media, threats to democracy. The same tired phrases used by those who had never known what it meant to fight for real freedom. Meanwhile, cracks appeared inside ECOWAS itself. In Ghana, lawmakers opposed sending troops. "This is not our war, Dantoir," they said. In Senegal, thousands of students marched through the streets shouting, "We will not kill our brothers." Even within Nigeria, discontent grew. Inflation soared, the army was stretched thin, and soldiers began to question their orders. A young Nigerian general sent a secret message to a friend in Ouagadougou. "We've been told to shoot. But how can I shoot at men fighting for the same dignity I dream of?" When Traoré read that note, he looked up from his desk and whispered to his aide, "When the enemy begins to doubt his own orders, that's when we are winning." On the 20th day of fighting, an ECOWAS convoy crossed into western Burkina Faso. They expected an ambush. Instead, they found thousands of villagers standing silently along the road, unarmed. An old man stepped forward and said, "You are our brothers. Don't shoot at Africans for those who don't live on this land." The soldiers froze. Then, one by one, they lowered their weapons. The convoy turned back. The footage spread like wildfire, the moment when hearts defeated bullets. The next evening, Traoré appeared on national television. "They claim to defend democracy," he said. "But what kind of democracy arrives on the tip of a gun? They claim to defend Africa, but who among us invited them?" He paused. "We do not fight against anyone. We only say, 'Let us be ourselves.'" The nation fell silent, then erupted in applause. Across villages, the chant rose again, "Traoré, Traoré." The people knew the battle was far from over, but the wall of fear had already fallen. That night, the wind swept through Ouagadougou's empty streets, fluttering the AES flag over the presidential palace. Traoré stood on the balcony, staring at the sky. "They call me a rebel," he murmured, "but if rebellion means my children will live free, then I accept the name." Across the continent, from Ghana to Ethiopia, from South Africa to Egypt, millions watched. They saw history being written, not in conference halls, but by the hands of ordinary Africans who refused to kneel. 3 weeks after war was declared, Western media still predicted Burkina Faso's collapse. But on the ground, the opposite was happening. ECOWAS itself was fracturing. Then came the broadcast that changed everything. On August 16th, Traoré appeared on national television. No medals, no uniform, just a plain khaki shirt and a thick dossier. His first words silenced the world. For too long, we allowed others to write our history. Tonight, we write our own. He opened the file and revealed classified ECOWAS communications, minutes from secret meetings between West African leaders and European mining corporations. One line shattered every illusion. Instability in the Sahel threatens our investment interests. Intervention is required to secure uranium supplies. Uranium? That one word sliced through the web of propaganda like a blade. From Nigeria to Senegal, from Ghana to Benin, people began to ask aloud, is this truly a war for democracy or a war for resources? Within hours, outrage flooded social media. The hashtag #NotOurWar surged to the top of African trends. Independent journalists released photos of cargo planes unloading European weapons under ECOWAS contracts signed before the ultimatum. One Nigerian analyst told international TV, "It's ironic, ECOWAS says it fights for democracy, yet it defends the interests of foreign companies." The illusion collapsed. The mask of moral justification was gone. Suddenly, Traoré was no longer branded a traitor. He became the face of Africa's awakening. 30 days into the conflict, footage aired of an ECOWAS convoy surrendering near the border. There were no shots, no blood, only white flags. A trembling young commander told reporters, "They said we were fighting dictators. But when we arrived, people offered us water and rice. They said, we are not oppressed." That day I realized we were deceived. The world began to wake up. Across France, Belgium, and the United States, human rights groups demanded investigations into the role of private contractors in the war. A major British newspaper ran the headline, "Sahel War, the Lie Exposed." From that moral victory, the Sahel Alliance announced the creation of the AES Joint Defense Council, headquartered in Ouagadougou. The treaty had only 4 clauses. An attack on one is an attack on all. The resources of each nation are untouchable. No non-African power has the right to dictate on African soil. Unity is our greatest weapon. As thunderous applause filled the hall, Traoré stood between Goïta and Tiani and said, "They divided us with fear. Now we will unite them with courage." The moment was broadcast live across the continent. In Accra, Lagos, Abidjan, people gathered around screens, some in tears. A young Ghanaian student wrote online, "For the first time, I have seen Africans refuse to ask permission to be free." But their counterattack wasn't only moral, it was strategic. Amid the chaos, a quiet plan unfolded, Operation Sunlight. Its mission, to break energy dependency once used as a weapon. Traoré, Goïta, and Tiani signed a new accord, a Trans-Sahel solar grid designed to power 80 million people without imported fuel. Mali secured the infrastructure. Niger provided manpower. Burkina Faso led the engineering. Within 2 days, hundreds of young technicians erected the first panels in the Nuna Desert. A foreign journalist asked Traoré, "Do you really think this can change Africa's energy future?" He smiled. When people say something is impossible, that's exactly when we begin. Meanwhile, in Niamey, a new television network went live, Voice of the Sahel, staffed by young African reporters. Their first broadcast opened with a line that echoed across the continent. "For too long, the world has spoken about us. Now we will speak for ourselves." From village radios to city billboards, that message ignited hope. In boardrooms thousands of miles away, fear crept in. A leaked European recording captured one advisor saying, "If the AES model works, it will spread, and then we lose everything." So they struck back the only way they knew: disinformation, fake images, sponsored unrest. But faith had already turned into ideology, and ideology cannot be erased. On the wall of the presidential palace, Traoré hung a map with a handwritten note: "Empires fall, not because of lost wealth, but because they lose the trust of their people." By late August, Millions marched across Africa, from Johannesburg to Kinshasa, from Dar es Salaam to Cairo. They didn't wave AES flags. They didn't wave ECOWAS banners. They waved one flag, Africa's flag, and their voices rose as one. We are no longer colonies. Freedom is not asked for. It is lived. In Bamako, the words flashed across a digital billboard, "One Africa, one soul." The air was no longer filled with the sounds of war, but of rebirth. Borders, languages, religions, they all blurred into one shared rhythm. That night, under the torchlight of Ouagadougou's central square, Traoré wrote in his diary, "We have nothing to prove to the world, only to ourselves. The war is not over, but we have already won something greater than victory, the belief that Africa can stand on its own." He closed the notebook, listening to the drums outside, not drums of battle, but of celebration, because across the continent something irreversible had begun. A people once silenced were singing again. A land once bound was rising again. They said, "Bullets could kill a man, but bullets cannot kill a dream." And in the firelit night of the Sahel, Africa, wounded, proud, unbroken, was finally awake.